Welcome to the Dialogue Architects, where we explore how enterprises can thoughtfully design, scale, and govern conversations between humans and machines. Today, we're joined by Soo Jin Lee from New York, a playwright and conversation designer who has worked at the intersection of AI, search, and human judgment for one of the largest streaming providers and language model providers that we know and love today. She's worked on both classic conversation design and generative conversational search, and she's known for arguing that the real skill in AI isn't just prompting, it's taste, judgment, and creative constraint. We're talking about the art and science of making search better. Soo Jin, welcome to the podcast. I know you're doing lots of exciting projects right now, but I'd love to start with a little bit of an origin story. Tell us a little bit about where your career began and how you ended up where you are.
Growing up, I think I was always a word lover. I enjoyed stories. I was a kid who always had the nose stuck in a book. I just followed my love of narrative, language, character, all of that. And by the end of my college courses, I took a playwriting class, and that changed my life. I found my format. I studied playwriting in grad school because I felt like, I got to do boot camp. And if I want to be a theater professional, I have to prove it, so you go get schooling, validation, all of that. And after that, I kept plugging away with writing plays, but then picked up temp jobs, this and that. I landed in conversation design 3 years ago, right after the pandemic. But during the pandemic and pre-pandemic, I was teaching public school. I heard about conversation design from a good friend. We were just having coffee, and she told me how she pivoted in, discovered it, and told me to do it because she's a fellow playwright. I'm a playwright. And she's like, you can do it. It's so easy. You have the training for it. Hop in. Don't be afraid. And I was like, I knew chatbots existed, had no idea that it took a lot of work because this was back in the, NLU, NLP, the legacy way of doing chatbots and not the generative AI way. But that's when I joined, and I think I'm grateful I joined pre the ChatGPT explosion so that I knew the dialogue tree way, the old school way of how to build. And then I'm still doing it. But I have moved into the GenAI space because obviously that is a hot space and you want to stay relevant. Although you can use both the legacy style. A lot of companies do hybrid anyway, depending on what industry you're in. But that is me. The one through line I would say is language, love of character. So it's always using words to solve problems.
Love that. I think that's one of the things I've noticed going to different conferences in the conversational AI or broader kind of conversational interface space is that there are a lot of theater kids. And I love it because, and I always figured it was maybe something to do with the idea of script writing, which you've done quite directly, and how it overlaps with conversation design kind of as a profession. But ultimately, as you mentioned, there's a lot more unscripted design happening right now. And I think that's what I'd love to learn a little bit more from you. You talked about teaching, working with students. However, you're still teaching, but not necessarily a student. What does that look like in your career today?
So I almost feel, I've heard this from another colleague, that working with models and teaching models to speak the way we want them to, that's like teaching a toddler how to speak. Like, use these words, not those, and giving maybe a reason why. And it's shaping their branding. So I think modeling, it's so funny that the humans have to model for the models so that they'll pick it up. So there are different tricks to doing that. But back to what you're saying, it's guiding them to use language the way you want them to. It's what I was doing in the classroom as well with the students. Like, hey, this is an okay essay. How do we make it better? Or I always like to show the version that's not great, and sometimes it's a first draft. And then we look at like the polished one. I'm like, what's the difference? Why do we want the polished one? Why do we care? And a lot of times kids might not be able to explain why B is written better than A, but they all kind of know. And so you get that vibe, the feeling that it's not as cluttered, it's clear language, or maybe even simple is elegant.
It's very much, I think, a space where the humanities and science combine, where we're currently in today. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about your day-to-day work, because I think you have a really interesting job, and I feel like there's probably going to be more of you in the future. But what are you doing day to day? What are you working on? Then we can kind of ground and explore the space a little bit more.
People are like, oh, conversation design is dead or it's evolving, etc. And even in the next year or 6 months, our titles going to change, or what else are we going to be responsible for? And then, of course, we have engineers who will help build. And what's kind of happened, I think, in the Gen AI space is that you really have to work closer together. But in a lot of companies, you're almost in separate rooms still. You know, it's like be in the same kitchen and cook together, right? Even if your skills are, your focus is, you know, little, it's really together. It should be together versus separate. I almost feel like it's having a playwright who writes the script and the director who talks to the actors and other designers to put it on the stage. You know, and if they work closely together, you see a play, we're launching a product together. And so the designers have a dream view, and this is what they recommend because it'll be good user experience. And then you have the engineers who need to also have buy-in, you get their buy-in, and they're like, okay, we'll build it. Because if they're not interested, they'll be like, no. And often I feel like many of the companies behind the scene, there are certain groups who have more power and get to decide where to steer the ship. But back to your question, conversation designers in the past, I feel like they show the workflow. When this piece of script happens, this is how it's going to answer. And then, you keep dividing into multiple, it's like the spider web of conversation. And what's interesting is it wasn't that complex unless you take years and years to build that flow out or all the flows out. Now it's almost like if you use a model, unless you put the guardrails in, like the conversation can go anywhere. And that's almost exciting, but scary. And so my experience now as a designer, I help like mold like system instructions. Sometimes that's called the system prompt. And each company has their own vocabulary for all of this Gen AI stuff, which is like fun. But looking at that, and if we tweak this, what happens to the output? So once our users engage with our interface, and that could be a chatbot, that can be a voice assistant, how does our model reply? Is it being accurate? Is it delivering what the user is asking for? Is it understanding what the user is asking for? And so for me, I'm helping with kicking off evaluations. So often I'm in the room with engineers who I often wonder, oh, who are they talking to get the guidance? Who's steering their ship? But often I feel like it's a lot about the launch date. You gotta test to make sure we're not gonna be embarrassed when we push out our product, because we want our customers to use the product, right? So if it's not delivering good results, then yeah. So for me, I feel like I am like a teacher where I am helping with instructions, and often it's instructions for human evaluators to rate. What are we trying to see? How is the model performing if we tweak this or that? Whatever the recipe or things engineers, the builders are working with, they'll tweak something or they'll push out a slightly different model. So a lot of times in Gen AI space, it's a lot of testing, a lot of iterating.
So I guess a question just to kind of ground this in terms of the type of conversational interface that you're building. I think a lot of people that come from either the conversation design space or the broader conversational AI space, now called agentic AI, ultimately think of the work that's being done to help a brand with something like a customer service agent, ultimately, a conversational interface that helps with customer service. You're actually working in a broader category, I would describe it. You're working on actually the kind of the models themselves, the ones that the ChatGPTs of the world, and also with some big brands. And if I recall, it sounds like you're working on some of these publicly accessible ones and also some in-house ones you have experience as well. Can you walk me through kind of the type of conversational interfaces that you're doing this work for?
Right. So I have dabbled in various interfaces. They go from something simple like searching for a movie. I want a certain movie, I want to watch it, and you're on a streaming service. But it's helping folks find what they want to watch where the user uses natural language. So that's kind of cool. Instead of, in the olden days, you have to make sure everything's spelled correctly. And sometimes the director's name can be very long, etc. Or you forget, the actor's last name, maybe you remember the first name, etc. So, but what's cool is that with natural language, it's a little more forgiving, and the model will help you find it based on what you have. It's almost guessing what you want, but you could describe it. So that is like smart search, if you will, and and it's to eventually. The point is to have something entertaining to watch. And maybe
Got it.
you don't want to be entertained and you want to watch something that's documentary. That could be entertaining as well, but like that's like more nonfiction. But that's something that I've worked on, and I think people don't realize that that can be AI as well. Most
Yeah.
people think, well, you got to talk to a robot, and it's not just that. We've had AI around for a while. We just didn't call it that or weren't aware the technology behind the scenes. Other interfaces, voice assistant, the smart voice assistants. Now in the past, so in the past, we've had voice assistants where somebody behind the scenes had to think in advance. Ooh, I bet the user's going to ask this question because today's a holiday or whatever. And so it's like you have to predetermine what users will ask and then build that flow. Because if you don't build it, the voice assistant will be like, I don't know how to help you. And then the user is going to be dissatisfied. So you need to have like a really strong data. So the solution written somewhere so that the bot can go grab it.
So I'd love to explore a little bit more. You talked about different types. So of course, classical customer facing, customer service agent. That's something that we at Rasa obviously we're working pretty closely on. But I think also components of that often have this smart search element to it. And I'd love to dive into that side because I think that's a really interesting space that has a lot of potential in it that you're exploring right now, especially as you talked about streaming services. I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like then a customer comes to the streaming service and says something, hey, I'm looking for this and that movie. I really like documentaries in the crime genre, something like that. And then are you actually then generating that output, something that's personalized just for them?
Yes, we want that to happen. So in the back end, we there are like multiple I would like to call them, I guess, fancy search engines, if you will. And this is where you need the data to be tagged well. So whatever that crime documentary you're talking about, it should have multiple meta tags, like a lot. And so if that is done well, it's like a good library system. Then when you send, ask the search engine to find it, it will find the possible titles for you. And then also we need language that's generated fresh for that query, and you get to answer. So some people are like, do we really need the word blurb? Nobody reads anymore. But at the same time, the word blurb lets the user know, I understand what you're asking for. Kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you order food, and if the server repeats back your order, even if you're the only one dining, it's just verifying. This is what I heard. Is this accurate? Because they might have, I don't know, misheard, etc. Anyone can make mistakes, including machines. So I think, and if the blurb is short, saying you asked for such and such, and here's what I found, right? That can be helpful. Again, I wonder how many people read the blurb. Some people love to read instructions, other people don't, and they just dive in and start building, when you get
Yeah.
the furniture set at home or whatever. Yeah.
Love that. I'd love to dive in a little bit more on this personalization element. And I understand also in the course of this project, that means you're also part of the team that sounds like is labeling, rating, and improving the type of blurbs that come back. Did I understand that correctly?
It's about looking at the accuracy.
Mm,
Most companies have lots of teams, and so you have the team that is responsible for owning the meta tagging.
hmm
And they're really good at that. Who is the audience for? Can children watch it? So that's also important. Tagging for that. Who is your audience? And also, maybe the emotions that get aroused when you watch certain things. And then of course you have the genres like thriller versus, fantasy versus. So there are just so many. And I think the more language you use, I don't know, there's a stronger chance of people getting what they want, kind of thing.
And you're on the team then that is rating or trying to improve the accuracy of the output. Now, this is tricky because I would imagine it's subjective and you need lots of different types of people with different backgrounds to kind of meet the need of whoever your target customer is. I'd love to learn a little bit more about this and what this looks like and your process and the types of teams that you work with.
So I think what's important is to have consistent raters. And often I think even big tech companies, what they do is they outsource the human rating thing. So it depends. Some companies are like, actually, let's have them in-house. So we have them, and then having them consistently over, multiple batches throughout a year. Then we can really track, is our model better at creating language that represents the brand as well as being accurate and not offensive. And there are all these things you have to track. But I think if you use the same raters and they start calibrating, and so that's an interesting thing. And I had to do rating myself as the classroom teacher who taught it, and I had to calibrate with my colleague who was also teaching the course, next door. I don't know when you outsource the human evaluation, if how to what extent that gets done. But if it's done in-house, you can actually control that. And so I've been in, both scenarios. And I feel like when you have the luxury of using the same raters, that can be really, really helpful. And then you got to pick sort of diverse raters, like maybe difference in background, ages, because, entertainment platforms serve all sorts of people. And, what might be offensive to one person, one rater might not be offensive to another. So sometimes you have to, discuss uncomfortable topics in like how you and I are having a conversation right now. And it's okay to talk about these offensive topics because people might search for this. And there's that other question, do we return titles? And obviously if we have the titles, yes. Otherwise we're blocking, we're gatekeeping, titles we have in the catalog. But sometimes, if people are asking for a certain title using inappropriate language, do we return it?
Yeah, huge
And
ethical element there.
yeah, because then suddenly,
Branding, everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
because someone's going to tweet about it the next day and then
Yeah.
make the company look bad. And it's like, oops. So it's not just about saving the company's face, but also, what does the company stand for? Because it's always like, yes, it's fun to get people in trouble
Yeah.
online or whatever. Some people really are into that. But also, as a company, where do you stand? And so it's a company's values. And then, you realize, wow, as designers, you really make a difference. And it's like AI ethics in practice
Yeah.
when you make those discussions. And then, most companies have legal teams who hover over this and guide you. This is okay right now. That is not okay, because a lot of services now carry adult material, and not just with cursing, like rated R like
Yeah.
that, but more adult stuff. And so, how do you? Yeah, it's
How
like
do you
when
keep
people
kids
ask for
safe
certain
online,
things.
ultimately? Yeah.
Oh, that's
That's
that too. That is also tricky as well. But yeah, yeah, and
okay.
also if you're looking at large language models, Yeah, do we really want to satisfy the customer and exactly what they want and deliver what they want, even if they're asking for things in a certain fashion?
Yeah.
So your company has to make a stand. Like,
Yeah.
yes, yes, we
You
will
want
be the best customer service ever, or actually, we do have standards, and these are our standards right now, today.
What does that actually look like? Are you combing through transcripts and saying, thumbs up, thumbs down? Are you giving written feedback? Are you giving, what does that actual feedback loop look like for your team so that you can improve the results in the future?
Yeah, so one way that has worked is that you plug into the model, like that you're sending like a customer query, like, hey, I want to, watch such and such a thing. And you get a response, and we get to rate and judge how the model responds. And did they use appropriate language? Should this have been flagged so that we don't even answer? And they're fallback answers. Like if you're asking for
Yeah.
something really inappropriate, we'll say, we don't carry that in our catalog. Try something else, right? Something along those lines. But I feel like we're seeing how much is the model letting through. Is it is it letting, are we answering anything that's asking for adult material, or are we blocking it and it's going to fall back? So we're judging that.
This has a parallel with RAG systems in the broader kind of conversational AI space. Like, what is the workflow? Who are the personnel that are required? Is that like, because it sounds like you're working with engineers, but I don't know when they pop up into this kind of broader picture.
Yeah. So it varies. It depends on
Okay.
the company you're at. Some companies are let you into the room with engineers because I think, it's really like model UX work. I feel like our conversation designers in the past, we were always under UX, but now since we're tinkering with models, we affect how the model gets manipulated. So, we're in the conversation, and I think it's companies who I think are wise will include the designers in a room with engineers, and you might not understand 80% of what they're talking about, but then over time, through immersion, you like pick up the language. That's what I notice, and that's valuable. And it doesn't mean you're back there tinkering too, but at least you know what's going on. And it takes time to be like, ooh, when they tweak this, now the results are like this. Let's not do that again. Or this model, this fresh model, is actually delivering.
It sounds like, so that means working with language models, one of the core things you've learned is like basically you need to let the language people cook in the language sphere and you need to let the engineers cook in the engineering sphere, but make sure they're all in the same room. Otherwise you're gonna end up with different and disparate user journeys.
I think it would be a great collaboration, and both teams can learn from each other. And it'd be great if there was like a hybrid person who could speak both languages. They're going to become really powerful, I think. And they might become the strategy people. It's like speaking multiple languages. You can speak the design language, you can speak the engineering language, and the product language. And then you make your own company. If you can do all of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think those folks probably end up being like strategy people who can look from above and get the bird's eye view and know what the goal is. But I feel that there's that whole debate about what can AI not create that humans can. And I feel like, I think AI can be trained to be manipulative and get into like AI human romances or whatever, but does it really know what heartbreak feels like? Does it know what loss feels like? Humans do. Humans get, experience trauma. They know what, joy feels like as well. And so that's the thing. I think human experience is what creates art. And so I don't know if AI will quite get there. Although there are people out there who are like, yes, I believe there's consciousness, in AI, etc. I haven't met that model
AGI.
yet, but
Yeah.
maybe that model exists already
AGI.
and just hasn't been pushed out to the public yet. I have no clue.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I think that I mean you see it in your own job that the simple distinction between right and wrong, which is entirely not so simple, is something that takes a team of people to determine, and a brand guideline and a company stance and a viewpoint. On that note, kind of to close out today, I'd love to know where you'd like to expand your reach in the future when you talk about, taking on new and different types of projects. It sounds like you've already had an enormous wealth of diversity in smart search, as you describe it. Is this a space you want to stay, or are there other areas of the broader kind of conversational interface universe where you think, ooh, I'd really like to go in that direction too?
So I'm thinking in two directions. I haven't given up on this, but I really love humor. And when I write plays, that's one thing I write, or poems. I write very seriously. In my mind, I'm serious. But when you throw it in front of a live audience, they're laughing. And some people might be like, that's great, that's great. But like, that's not my goal. I'm not trying to be a comic writer, but it's naturally there. And I feel like humor, even in humans, I feel like it's a rare thing. And funny people come from funny families. And it's like this thing that gets passed down. And I don't think it could really be taught either. And so if we could teach models to be inherently funny, I think it would bring so much joy. I have a boss who once said, we can never have too many jokes. Because like the world needs it. And these are not like mean jokes, but more of just wholesome, but not dumb jokes. It's just, laughter and feeling joy from laughter. It's such a gift. And so I don't think people are focusing on funny bots as much. And that already sounds kind of cringe. But like a bot who really is a little sassy and that can bring joy to the customer service experience. And that's possible. I feel like if someone can really tweak that or know how to bring that forward, that person will probably make a lot of money because it's not easy to produce.
Thank you so much. I think it was such a good conversation on like smart search, human evaluators. I think that's a huge piece we haven't cracked yet in the space, what human evaluation looks like. So it's a pleasure to learn from you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. Thank you for this opportunity.